Okay, so this is the second video, and it's my reflection on the fieldwork, the practicum. I left off with for the checking for understanding. We went over the key terms that we used, and that we used these questions down here to check to make sure that students understand the process of bacteria and fermentation, so that we could verify that they actually understand and are able to meet the objectives. And for the independent practice, I wanted them to research the other examples of fermentation in organisms, not just fermentation in yogurt, but see what else they could do, just so they have a better understanding of how the process works in other areas besides yogurt. The third lesson was when we actually started making yogurt, and this was fun. This is the one I actually taught in class, and the objective was to make sure they are able to identify the how that fermentation changes based on the temperature of the environment. So we started first doing a warm-up. They did a pre-reading activity, which is down here. I'll show you that. And then they did drawings and questions that they had to answer. And then we did a class discussion for it to make sure that we had the right ideas, the right information before we started the lab. We talked about safety. We talked about what they were going to do, what was not allowed. And there was a lot of excitement, so it was hard to keep the class quiet, but they were really excited to be able to do this. We started with the starter culture for the yogurt, and everybody got 3 cups. Every student got 3 cups to use with the starter culture to make their yogurt. We had an incubator, refrigerator, and then we also had to have the temperature in the room, and made sure that every student was recording all this information. And so they followed the procedures in our lab, and then we had a data table that they had to fill out. And basically, even though it's a very simple and short lab here, or for the instructions, the attached information really goes into detail and makes them think. And since this is the first day of 3 days that we did lab, it wasn't just one day where we had to learn everything. We actually had several days to go over the information. At the end of the lab, the independent practice was finishing their data table, making their observations. And then they needed to basically kind of guess what they thought the results would be of the fermentation lab. So when they came back in, what did they think it was going to taste like? What was the texture like? Color, odor, all that stuff. I wanted to see if they could predict what was going to happen. So this is the pre-reading that they had to do for the lab. Things that we talked about for safety. Then they had the questions on how to start. Drawing a picture of how the bacteria make the yogurt. Why does the milk become thicker over time? How can we determine the bacteria actually doing the job? So we had all these different things they had to do. Then we had the actual lab. What they needed to do, they had to state the problem, the hypothesis. So we started off with those. Then we went into what we were using, what we were going to be doing for the procedure. This is the table that they all used, and they had to fill in. It was pretty neat because it was simple, but because it was simple, it was easily filled out, and there wasn't any question on what they're supposed to put there, what's supposed to be put here. So then we move on to sell the day 4, and this was the day 2 of making the yogurt. And they were able to, at the end of this lab, be able to list the reasons the bacteria are useful for making yogurt, the process the bacteria use to break down the lactose, and why it's able to break down the lactose. They also needed to sum up the unit. Why did we do this? What were the uses of the bacteria when we did fermentation? What happened? What was the product of the and the reactant of the lactic acid? And the end of it, this is the one I really liked, was the experiment design. So basically we did usual stuff. You have to be able to identify why we did the lab. So they did that through reflection, thought, group discussion, then the detail and observation and recording of the data, and then their post-lab write-up. So they did all that stuff, and that's how we were able to make sure that they actually understood. The formal thing, though, was a design and experiment project. They had to design the next lab they were going to do. And the reason that's a formal one is because they had to take the principles that they learned through fermentation in the bacteria and apply it to something new, to something different. And it was neat because at the end I showed that they are able to use internet resources, but they had to be credible resources. And we went over a list of credible resources. And since the teacher had already covered that at the beginning of the year, they've already been using the credible sources, so they knew what that was. And so they had to design this experiment. And they gave them a rubric, and this was up on the board, so they knew what they needed to do and what they needed to put in. And the big thing was, I told them that, this particular thing was going to be 30% of the unit grade. This was decided between the teacher and I because it is a summative assignment. We want to make sure that they're understanding the whole bacterial process. So we made it quite a bit. Now, it's only 30% of the unit grade. It's not actually 30% of their entire semester grade, so it's not that disastrous if they're not getting it. But because when we made it, it became a very serious project, and people really put a lot of care and effort into it. So the last day was making yogurt lab day 3. Basically, they're writing up the experiment. They're finishing up the write-up, and they were doing the experiment. The teacher took over for this day because she wanted to make sure there was certain information covered in the write-up, and then he wanted to make sure that the experiment design was correct. So they were able to sum up the unit, identify the uses of bacteria, something as before, and then do that experiment design. And it was kind of the same thing as yesterday, just a little more focused on the experiment design. It was neat because I was still there. The kids were still turning to me, asking me for information. But I did have a video, though, that we showed, and it was a little bit longer than the other ones, but it's bioprocessing and fermentation. And so this was great because it actually gave them other things to look for. So they, because it was a little longer, they learned, I had them write down 5 things they learned, 2 ideas they got for their experiment, because it does give information on what experiments there are. And this was a jumping off point if they hadn't gotten very far on their experiment. And then the differences between what they experienced in the experiment and what the video explains, relating back to the lab we did, and then what information became more understandable after their video. So this is all trying to reinforce the concepts, and it was really neat because the teacher that I was working with, he was really adamant that we need to reinforce and reinforce, and just when you think you've reinforced enough, you reinforce again. And then so again, we have all the information on their experiment project, and then basically we were just walking around to make sure that they were progressing and understanding. And then I gave them an extra credit, and I didn't think anyone were going to do it, but I needed something for my independent practice box. But they all did it. Not all of them. Well, I guess it's kind of bad, but some of the kids that were like in the honors classes and everything were actually did them. They were excited to continue, and so they did a PowerPoint with 4 to 5 slides. And that one girl she said that it only took her like 10 minutes to get all the information off the internet, and like another half an hour to get the whole thing done. She got 25 points when their whole unit project was like 75 points. So it was a significant amount, and so it did really well. Really quickly, so I think my students were able to meet the objectives in the labs. So overall, I think I did well with that. Changing, I think I'd like to find a different way to instruct for that second lab, where it's just so word heavy and so much direct instruction. I'm really not sure how to go about it. The teacher I was working with did say that sometimes you just have to do that, but I mean, I was bored writing it, so I'm sure they were bored listening to it. And I think I did a good job matching a lot of the theories that we've learned in class about reaching the different students, because with the group work, with the individual class discussions before the group work, I think we were able to give them an idea to work with, see what we're talking about, put them on the right path, and then have them talk to each other and get those ideas themselves. So it's not just leave them out there stranded and trying to figure out something on their own. It's leading them to it, but letting them discover that they're being led to it, I guess. I don't know. But it seemed to work pretty well. They were doing well. I do like teaching the science class. I worry sometimes about the behaviors, though. They get loud, and even though loud can be okay, I find that loud often accompanies being off task, and I'm not really sure how to deal with that yet. So that's the one thing I really do want to work on after all of this. But otherwise, it was a fun assignment. Thanks.